Alright, are you ready to make some homemade jam with me? I found Pomona's Pectin whenever I was looking for a recipe that wouldn't require so much sugar to make, considering Palmer eats jelly toast nearly every morning for breakfast. First, I'm going to mix up the calcium water and set it aside. Next, I'm going to heat my frozen fruit in a saucepan and get the juices to release. I'm even going to use an immersion blender to help everything break up really well. My parents have a mulberry tree, so my dad actually picked these, washed them, and put them in the freezer for me. I'm just going to continue this till I feel like I've got the most juice possible. Then I'm going to pour everything through the strainer. I'm actually using 2 different strainers. There's definitely fancier tools to do this, but this is what I have on hand. So I'm going to pour it through the first smaller strainer and press out all of the juice that I can. I'm actually going to feed these seeds and scraps to the chickens later. They love it. And then I'm going to use the bigger strainer to catch any little bit of seeds that slip through or I overflow. If I was making jam or preserves, I would actually leave the seeds in here, and I did actually split the batch, so I made some jam and some jelly to where I strained the seeds. Once I have my 4 cups of juice, I'm going to pour it back in my clean saucepan and start heating it up. While that is heating up, I'm going to come back over here and add my pectin powder to my honey. It gives you the option to add sugar or honey to this recipe. I just chose honey, but you can do whatever you'd like. I'm going to stir that really well. It gets kind of thick once you add in that pectin, but go ahead and mix it all the way. I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but go ahead and make sure those jars are clean and in warm water ready to be filled. Also, don't mind the mess behind me. Zach has been processing a deer. Alright, once that fruit juice is brought up to a boil, we're going to be adding our lemon juice and that calcium water that we prepped in the very beginning. I'm not going to give you exact measurements on here because I really want you to check that insert that comes in the box of pectin, because it's going to be different depending on what kind of jelly you're making. So the acidity levels in your fruit are going to vary. So next we're going to add that mixture of honey and pectin and give it a good stir. We're going to stir it vigorously for 1 to 2 minutes, and then I'm going to show you a little trick. So before I got started making the jelly, I actually put a frozen spoon and saucer in the freezer so that I could check, because obviously your jelly's not going to gel whenever it's hot. So I grabbed the cold spoon and put a little bit on the frozen saucer, and I popped that back in the freezer really quick. Hang tight, I'm going to show you what it does. Next, I'm going to go ahead and pull that from the heat because, look at this, it gelled. You don't want to overboil your jelly, but you also don't want to underboil it, so this is a good way to tell whenever it's done. Alright, now I'm going to take you through the process of canning jelly. So grab your ladle and your funnel and go ahead and fill those jars, leaving just about 1/4 of an inch to spare. You can always go back and top it off and make sure everybody is super even and ready to be canned. Now for one of the most important steps of this whole process, and that is cleaning the rims. Making sure your rims are super clean is so important, because if you don't have a clean rim, you're not going to have a clean seal. Alright, now you know the rule to use new seals, and go ahead and pop those on, center them up the best you can, and then we're going to screw the rings on until they're just finger tight. Now, if you're like me, you hear everybody say finger tight whenever they're doing canning tutorials, but they never explain what they mean. What they mean is just go ahead and screw it until the jar kind of turns on its own. Don't crank it down, but make sure it's tight enough to hold the seal on. Alright, now it's time for the super scary part. I'm just kidding, it's not that scary. Canning jelly is actually a great place to start if you're new to canning, because it's just a water bath can. So it makes canning not so scary. So go ahead and move your jars over to a big pot of boiling water. You want to make sure that water is going to cover the lids, and then you're going to put it in there. Again, I'm not going to tell you exactly how long, because I want you to check your own elevation to know how long you're going to boil it for. Finally, we have jelly or jam, whichever you chose to make, but we're not quite done yet. We want to actually put this on a drying mat for at least 24 hours untouched to make sure all of those lids seal. Go ahead and remove the rings and label your jars. Don't forget to put the date, because even though you think you might not forget, you will. And don't forget to let your toddler play with a Sharpie.